Hi, Kristen Atchison here, and we're going to talk about technical writing. Technical writing is the kind of writing that we do here in the psychology. So I'm kind of going to give you an overview of it, but really the only way that you can really improve your skill and do this is by practice, okay? So that's kind of what we're doing here in this course is kind of practicing and developing these skills, okay? So I'm not expecting you to write a publishable kind of paper the first time around, but that's the kind of things that we're working towards is that level of specificity, that level of clarity, so that you really are communicating well with your audience. In technical writing, it's really important to not have errors just like in all writing, but even more so in technical writing because the complex nature of what you're talking about. So I saw this on the internet, and I just liked it. Every time you make a typo, the errorists win. It's really important to not turn in the first thing you write. Okay, never, never, never turn in the first thing you write because we're human. We make mistakes. The 50th thing I write probably still has some errors in it. Okay, I'm not expecting perfection, but by the same time, there needs to be some level of polish to it. One thing that I find is very helpful, I'm really good at when I'm reading what I wrote, reading over my errors, okay? I read it the way I thought I wrote it, not the way I actually wrote it. And that's how I miss a lot of my own errors. So what I find is helpful, outside of having someone else read it, is having the computer read back to me what I wrote. So there's various programs on your computer that can do this. I know the Macs have it kind of built in, a talk function, so you can select the text that you want to look over, and it will read it to you. And I can hear when I have a grammar mistake. I can't necessarily see it when I'm reading it, but I can hear when I have a grammar mistake. I'll read over a typo that's there. It's also really good with those words that are similar but aren't. You can sometimes hear those differences as well, and sometimes you don't see them. So again, kind of check for these typos so that the errorists don't win. Okay, so let's go over some guidelines for technical writing. There's some really great tips on this from MIT, and that link is on Brightspace. So I really recommend looking at that, especially if this is something that is new to you, and that you feel that you're going to struggle with or you are struggling with. First of all, know your audience. I am not the only member of your audience. I'm a person in your audience, but I'm not the only member of your audience. Your audience for basically any of these assignments is anybody who's interested in these things, anybody who hasn't read these articles. The audience for a summary is anybody who hasn't read the article, right? There's no reason to read a summary if you've already read the article. So the audience for a summary is anyone who hasn't read that article. So when you're doing that, don't write to me. I'm a member of your audience, especially for ERS2 and the synthesis, because I won't have read your articles. But I am not the only member of your audience, okay? And I really want you to be writing towards your whole audience and not just towards me. That requires that you balance kind of the level of information that you're giving them. If you assume that they know more than they do, they'll be confused, okay? I do not know every fine-tuned detail of every area of psychology. I just don't. It's not humanly possible, okay? So you can't assume that we know more than we do. You can't assume that you put in a measure, the name of a measure, and I know what that's measuring. I don't. You need to tell me what's being measured, not necessarily the name of the measure. If you underestimate us, and if you tell us every minute detail of everything, then we'll be bored. So technical writing is really a kind of a balancing act between these two things. If you're going to err on one side or the other, bore us, okay? Like if you have to pick, it's better for us to be bored and understand more than you've understand what you've given and then some, than it is for us to be confused, okay? Again, the goal of technical writing is to really convey that information to your audience. And so if we are confused, you haven't done a good job of that. If we're bored, that's a better option because at least we got the information. So again, if you have to pick one, if you're gonna, and it's a hard balancing act. When I write, I always side on the error of boredom too. But if you have questions, definitely ask me and I can kind of help guide you to where that nice middle ground is. So the guidelines for technical writing, we need to identify your purpose, okay? The purpose for technical writing is it's expository writing, okay? Big, huge word. Expository just means to explain or describe something. That's what we're doing here, okay? And we do this in a formal and technical way. So we're not using informal language here because we're explaining or describing something. And so we do it in very formal kind of way, okay? We do it in a very explanatory kind of way. And so our principal purpose then is to describe and sometimes convince, but primarily describe. And so to describe and convince, it goes in that order. So if you noticed on your class attendance assignments, a lot of times I said summarize first and then give me your opinions, then give me your thoughts. Because I need you to describe the thing that you're talking about before you give me your thoughts on it, before you can tell us what you think about that thing if you haven't told us what that thing is. So again, you're going to do this description first. Another important thing is to really write clearly. This is really the foundation, okay? So some of you have already seen that I write things like clarity issues. It's not clear what you're trying to say, and that's a problem because if I don't understand what you're trying to say, then you're not doing a good job of explaining it, okay? So this is really, really important. And sometimes you can only get this by working and reworking a sentence to really get to the point of it. Also, if you don't understand what you're writing about, you're not going to be able to write about it clearly. So again, your understanding of the topic is really, really important too. This is true of clarity of thought and expression, okay? So it means, again, you need to understand what you're talking about, but you also need to be able to clearly explain it, okay? And if you can't do either one of those, then we probably need to go back to the original source and try and better understand that. And again, I can be a help with that if you're not exactly sure what your article is talking about, schedule time and come meet me at office hours. That would be great. There's also support through the various tutoring labs for psychology that we'll talk about as well. So again, the best way to do this is you just work and rework sentences for clear and logical flow of ideas, okay? Sometimes that requires you cutting out a word, okay? So if it's possible to cut out a word, always cut it out. George Orwell, he's not a technical writer, had it correct, okay? If you can cut that out, if you can rework that sentence and only say that word once instead of saying it twice, do it. Again, that really helps with that clarity and that conciseness that really conveys your ideas in a way that your audience can get them a lot quicker. So again, be concise. Say only what needs to be said. Don't say more. So again, if you're describing a measurement, tell me what that measurement was. Don't tell me that it was, the Wechsler, which Wechsler IQ test it was. Tell me that they measured IQ using these kind of metrics. Tell me that they, that they were measuring anxiety. Tell me that they were measuring, these various anxiety symptoms and not that they were using this. One way that we can do this is using short words and short sentences. These are much more easy to understand. So again, really kind of, these are technical ideas to begin with. I don't need you to put your technical idea in this big complex sentence so that you sound smart, okay? You sound smart because you're talking about this complex idea and you're talking about it clearly. That's what conveys that intelligence, that level of understanding, not the complex sentence that you put it into. So again, sometimes those shorter words and those shorter sentences are really easier to understand because we're not having to try and figure out what you're saying in amongst that grammar. We can just figure out what you're saying. Decrease the wordiness, again, cutting out words when necessary. And again, that's best done through revision, okay? So you write your paper and then you go back through and you work it sentence by sentence to revise it and see how you can make that clearer and more concise. Another really important part is to be precise. This means choosing the right word for what you want to say. Technical writing is not the kind of writing that you need a thesaurus for, okay? If using the term, positive affect is the way to say it, then say positive affect. And I don't care if you say positive affect 50 times in your paper, if that's what you're precisely talking about. Don't tell me happy, because happy is not the same thing as positive affect. If you're talking about positive affect, talk about positive affect. I don't need happy, joy, calm. I don't need any of those other words. I need the precise word for what you're talking about. So this is, again, don't kind of make this informal. Really use those formal terms and be precise about what you're talking about. Again, this helps your clarity. This helps your audience know what you're talking about. This helps tell us what those operational definitions were. Happy is a really kind of amorphous thing, but positive affect's a little bit more precise. We're just talking about anything not negative or not neutral, kind of on the positive side. So it's a little bit more precise as to what is being talked about. Grammar, really important, okay? Grammar, I feel like me teaching you about grammar is a cruel joke from the universe. This is not an area that I excel in either. But really, grammar is about clarity, right? So if the grammar is about you being able to express yourself in a way that other people can understand, okay? And so poor grammar really distracts the reader and introduces this unnecessarily ambiguous situation, which doesn't help with your clarity, which doesn't help explain things. And it really decreases your credibility. And again, I have no problem with those simple sentences where you're not going to have a problem with grammar, because it is just a simple sentence. So don't get yourself into these, complex grammatical situations where you really can. It is harder to make those follow those grammar rules. There's also Grammarly, a link on Brightspace as well that can help you with these as well. The Writing Center can also be a help with this. And again, this is one of those things that you can improve by revisions. Writing is definitely one of those kind of practice kind of events. And so the more you write, the better your grammar gets. My grammar is years above what it was when I graduated from college, because grad school was kind of, a nothing but writing kind of situation. I did so much of it. And in that time period, my grammar from the beginning of grad school to the end of grad school changed dramatically because of practice. My grammar continues to improve because by reading and revising, helping you revise all your papers and editing your papers, I continue to improve my grammar skills. So again, this is something that you really have to practice. Some people just get it, and I'm definitely one of those, you got to put in the effort to get it kind of people. And I'm sure some of you are too. So just because it's not something that you excel at doesn't mean that you can't do well with it. You just have to know your limitations and work within those. Write fairly. You need to choose words and sentences that are fair and not biased, okay? Sometimes you'll see I'll circle something and like, okay, you're biasing this, okay? When you're summarizing something, you need to be true to what they said. Don't put what you think on it. You've got time to tell me what you think. You have time to offer criticisms, but don't put those kind of biases on there. You need to be writing fairly. Kind of think about how journalism's supposed to be, that it's supposed to be kind of more that middle of the road and everybody can make their own decision based on the information that's there. That's how you're supposed to be writing, from this really middle point, okay? We need to avoid bias when referring to theories, genders, racial, ethnic groups, age, these sorts of things. And we need to describe people at appropriate levels of specificity. So we can't just say kids. Well, what do you mean by kids? We need to talk about what level of age. If we're talking about different racial or ethnic groups, we need to be sensitive to those labels, okay? And we need to use formal labels. So Caucasian versus white. African American, if we're talking about an American population, versus Black. These sorts of things are very, very important because they avoid the bias in speech. We also avoid the term subjects when referring to human participants because that's kind of an ethical distinction. So think about it. Did you participate in something or were you subjected to something? You can see how you would much rather be a participant in something than have been subjected to something. So again, because we have these high ethical standards, our language needs to reflect that and use the term participants. Along those grammar lines, avoid the unigraph. My friend from graduate school made this for her students and was kind enough to let me use it, using the paragraph sign as a unigraph. It's important to have multiple paragraphs, okay? When you have a new idea, you have a new paragraph. So do that. That really helps your reader understand and follow, and it helps with clarity. And again, sometimes you'll get those things better as you do revisions. Like, oh, well, this really should be its own paragraph here. And the other thing that really helps with this is outlining. When you outline, you're basically putting things into paragraphs that need to be like, this is a topic, and so this needs to be a paragraph, and this is a topic, so this needs to be a paragraph. And it really helps you see where these things go. And that's one of the reasons that we've gone through the outline process. We'll continue to use it, is it really is a huge help for organizing your ideas so that you really do have that clarity of thought and expression. Please don't turn me into an owl. I've already, on some of your papers had to write who. Tell me who you're talking about. Be specific. Are you talking about the participants? Or are you talking about the researchers? What are the researchers' names? In your synthesis, you're going to have multiple researchers. So don't just say the researchers. Say their names. Use those proper APA style citations so I know who you're talking about. If you're talking about participants, who are these participants? Are they adults? Well, if so, what kind of adults are they? Are they college students? Are they retirees? Who are you talking about? You really need to be specific in these sorts of things. This is, again, about that clarity and precision. We can't understand what you're talking about if we don't know who you're talking about. So really think about that. If you're using a term that might kind of be ambiguous, go ahead and switch that out with something that is more precise and is more clear. So that, again, that I don't turn into this cute little owl and go who on your paper. Another thing that's clearly helpful is writing an interesting report. That's a lot harder than some of these other things. But one of the things that is helpful with that is when you reflect your involvement with the research problem. That's one of the reasons that I don't assign you a topic to write about. I want you to pick the topic so that you have some level of involvement, you have some level of interest, because your level of interest helps your audience be engaged. If you're interested and you're presenting this information because you're interested, it's going to be more compelling than if you're presenting it because you have to and this is horrible and I hate it so much. Okay? That comes across in your writing. So it's important to reflect your level of involvement, your level of engagement in this to really make that interesting and that compelling arguments. I've already written this on the majority of your papers. Do not use I in technical writing. We avoid first person in technical writing. And this has to do with the formality piece of it. So while you are talking about your level of involvement, you wouldn't say, I picked this topic because I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. Because A, that's very informal. And B, that doesn't really give us anything. You can tell us that topic is interesting and why that topic is interesting without saying I think. Okay, and there's some links that I put on Brightspace to kind of help you with this. I know that can be a struggle to switch from that first person. So again, there are links on Brightspace that can really help with that. When you're writing your whole paper, think of it as a story, and you're trying to tell a good story, okay? So you need to introduce the various players, you need to introduce the topics to the stage, you need to introduce the problem, you need to solve the problem. Think about it from this story perspective, and so that we understand all the pieces of the puzzle. You're telling us a story, and especially in your synthesis, you're making a case, you're making an idea. Like, this is my idea, this is my thesis, and this is why I'm right. And you'll go through and kind of give you the various pieces of the story of how you're brilliant and you came to this wonderful idea. So again, really strive to tell that good story. Another really good way to improve your own writing skills is to read more journal articles. I know sometimes they can be mind-numbing and sometimes they're not fun to read, but if you find a topic that you're really interested in, they can be very enjoyable. So really reading these articles develops your own writing skills because they're written in technical writing. They're written in this format that we're looking for. They're being concise, and that's why they are dry, is because they're being concise. They're not using flowery language. They're just trying to use this expository writing and convey their information to you. So again, reading these articles can be good examples of the kind of writing that we're trying to work towards. Again, I said lots of times, there's web links on D2L, so helpful web links. There's a list of them. We've got Grammarly, we've got the technical writing tips from MIT. There are 3 examples of 3 links for avoiding first person as well. So all 5 of those things are really, really helpful towards this. There's additional help for technical writing outside of what I can provide for you through the Psychology Writing Center. You can register for a 55-minute appointment in Kell, which is conveniently located near your lab space, and you register on Sona for this. And they can help with any aspect of writing, including APA style. So if you've got the writing down, but the APA style is something that you're struggling with, you can go to them with that. If you've got the APA down, but you're struggling with the writing, you can go to them for that. If you're struggling with the grammar, you can go to them for that. So they are really here to support you. They are staffed with students who have done well in 3510 and 3530. So at the end of every semester, I get an email that says, who do you want to recommend as tutors, either for writing or writing's methods and or statistics, or both. And I offer up recommendations. And so again, that's something that you could also work towards as well if that's something you're interested in doing, is kind of being that you have to have an A average in statistics and I believe a B average in research methods, though that may have changed. The Writing Center can also help you, it's the Writing Method Center, so they can also help you understand those research articles as well. So you can also go see them for that. Take a hard copy of the instructions, so take your rubric with you, and your writing, so that they can really be most helpful. If you have questions about the specific instructions in the rubric, they can't help you with that. I wrote those instructions, so come see me. If you have any questions about the assignment, always come see me first or ask me first. Email, we can talk on the phone, whatever the case may be. So if you have questions about the instructions, ask me, but they can help you with all aspects of writing and understanding articles and all those sorts of things. And again, that's a 55-minute appointment, and it's not just on a Tuesday, so it opens up your availability some too. See you in class.